The Dralethian warship Molten Vengeance hung in the void like a jagged shard of obsidian, its angular hull bathed in the sickly orange glow of its plasma reactors. The vessel was a fortress of dark metal and molten steel, its segmented armor plates shifting like the scales of some ancient predator. Inside the command nexus, High Commander Draltal watched the tactical display with eyes like smoldering embers, his clawed fingers tightening around the armrests of his throne. Before him, the human colony world of New Carthage burned. It had been a simple operation, a punitive strike to remind these upstart primates of their place in the galactic hierarchy. The Dralethian Dominion had long dismissed humanity as weak, their technology crude, their resolve brittle. They had seen the humans fight among themselves, watched their wars with detached amusement. But now, as the Molten Vengeance's sensors painted the devastation below, something gnawed at Draltal's instincts. The humans had not fled. They had not begged. They had dug in. Vashdor, the ship's chief scientist, approached with a data slate clutched in his talons. His copper-plated cranial ridges twitched in agitation. High Commander, the resistance is unexpected. Draltal did not need the report to know this. The colony's defenses had been obliterated within the first hour of the bombardment. And yet, the humans had not broken. They had vanished into the ruins, into the tunnels beneath their shattered cities. And now they struck back with a ferocity that defied logic. On the display, a Dralethian patrol unit blinked out. Another ambush. Show me. Draltal growled. Vashdor hesitated, then activated the playback. The feed was grainy, distorted by interference, but the shapes were unmistakable. Human soldiers clad in scorched armor, moving through the wreckage like ghosts. They struck without warning, vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. Some wielded jury-rigged plasma cutters, others carried crude explosives, improvised weapons, yes, but wielded with terrifying precision. And then there were the eyes. Even through the static, Draltal could see them. Cold, calculating, utterly devoid of fear. A shiver ran down his spine. He had seen that look before, not in prey, but in predators. On the surface, Commander Maya Fraiser crouched in the ruins of what had once been a hospital, her breath steady despite the ash-choked air. Her armor was cracked, her rifle nearly out of power, but her hands did not shake. Around her, the remnants of her battalion moved in silence, their faces smeared with soot and blood. They had no illusions. They would not survive this, but they would make the Dralethians remember. Captain Thomas Carter slid beside her, his visor cracked, revealing a grin that was more teeth than humor. "They're getting sloppy," he murmured. "Third patrol this hour, getting reckless." Maya didn't answer. She didn't need to. They all knew the truth. The Dralethians had come to teach humanity a lesson. But humanity had lessons of its own, and they would be paid in full. The Dralethian warship Molten Vengeance hung in orbit like a jagged blade plunged into the flesh of the sky. Its armored hull pulsed with the dull glow of its forge, core casting an eerie orange, red light across the ruined planet below. The ship was a fortress of segmented metal and brutalist angles, its weapons arrays humming with restrained fury. Inside, High Commander Draltal stood before the holographic projection of the battlefield, his four-fingered hands clasped behind his back. The tactical display flickered with the last known positions of the human resistance, scattered, broken, yet still moving, still fighting. It made no sense. The humans should have been crushed by now. Their cities were ash, their fleets were wreckage, their armies had been outmatched from the beginning, and yet they refused to die. Vashdor, the lead scientist of the Dralethian War Council, approached with measured steps, his armored boots clicking against the dark metal deck. His cranial ridges pulsed faintly with irritation as he studied the same data. "They are not behaving like a defeated species," Vashdor observed, his voice a low, grinding hum. Draltal's mandibles twitched. "They are not behaving like any species we have conquered. The humans should have surrendered by now. They should have begged for mercy, as all others had." The Dralethian Empire had shattered civilizations far older, far stronger. Species with genetic superiority, with psychic mastery, with technological wonders beyond human comprehension. And yet, none of them had fought like this. None of them had looked at annihilation and smiled. On the surface, the ruins of New Carthage groaned under the weight of orbital bombardment. The skeletal remains of skyscrapers clawed at the smoke, choked sky, their broken frames trembling with each distant impact. Commander Maya Fraiser moved through the wreckage like a shadow, her boots silent against the rubble. Her armor was battered, its once pristine plating now scorched and dented, but her HUD still flickered with faint life. Around her, the last of her battalion followed in disciplined silence. They were ghosts now. Officially, the Fey-ND Terran Rangers had been wiped out 3 days ago. Their transponders had gone dark, their comms had fallen silent. The Dralethians had logged them as eradicated. Let them think that Captain Thomas Carter crouched beside her, his rifle cradled against his chest. His face was streaked with grime, his left eye swollen shut from a shrapnel wound, but his grin was still sharp. "They're scanning again," he murmured, nodding toward the sky. Maya didn't need to look up to know what he meant. The telltale pulse of Dralethian sensor sweeps prickled against her armor's dampeners. The enemy was searching for them, but they wouldn't find them. She tapped a command into her wrist display, and the squad's active camouflage flickered to life, bending light around them like a mirage. The Dralethians had superior sensors, superior firepower, superior numbers. But the humans had learned, and they had adapted. Aboard the Molten Vengeance, Vashdor's claws tapped impatiently against the console. The sensor logs showed nothing, no heat signatures, no movement, no life. Something was wrong. The humans had been too quiet, too still. Dralethian doctrine dictated that a broken enemy either fled or surrendered, but the humans had done neither. They had simply vanished. Vashdor's neural interface flared with unease. He had studied human history before the invasion. He had read their wars, their revolutions, their last stands. They had a habit of doing the impossible, and that thought unsettled him more than any weapon. Maya exhaled slowly, her breath fogging the inside of her visor. The Dralethians had come to teach humanity a lesson, but humanity had learned long ago that the best lessons were written in blood. And tonight, they would be the teachers. The Dralethian fleet hung in the void like a swarm of molten embers, their angular warships silhouetted against the bruised nebula of what had once been human space. Their hulls pulsed with the dull, rhythmic glow of forge. Heat, the copper veins of their armor plating shimmering in the cold starlight. To any observer, they were an unstoppable force, a tide of industrial might that had crushed species 10 times older than humanity. And yet, aboard the Molten Vengeance, Vashdor could not shake the gnawing unease coiling in his secondary stomach. The humans were gone, not routed, not hiding, simply erased from their own territory, as if they had never been there at all. His neural interface flickered with the last sensor sweep. Empty cities, silent orbital platforms, derelict ships drifting without power. No life signs, no resistance. It made no sense. Dralethian doctrine was clear. A defeated enemy either broke or burned, but the humans had done neither. They had left behind no corpses, no scorched earth, no final broadcasts of defiance. Only silence. And silence, Vashdor knew, was the most dangerous sound in the universe. Aboard the Silent Dawn, Commander Maya Fraiser watched the tactical display with the patience of a predator. The Dralethians had expected humanity to fight like cornered animals, to lash out with everything they had in one desperate suicidal charge. That was how other species had fallen before them. But humans had learned from history, and they had learned from hunters. The Silent Dawn was not a warship, not in the way the Dralethians understood. It was a ghost, a shadow wrapped in stolen technology and human ingenuity. Its hull drank in radiation, its engines left no wake, its weapons were not yet active, Because the first rule of the hunt was to never let your prey hear you coming. Maya's fingers traced the edge of the console, feeling the faint vibration of the ship's heartbeat. Around her, the crew worked in silence, their faces illuminated by the pale glow of tactical readouts. They had spent years preparing for this. Years of watching, of studying, of learning. Now it was time to teach. Dralethian Command, Nexus High Commander, Draltal's mandibles twitched in irritation as he reviewed the reports. "Explain this," he growled, the words vibrating through the metallic chamber. "Where are they?" Vashdor hesitated. The answer was obvious, and yet, admitting it felt like a betrayal of everything the Dralethians believed. They withdrew. Draltal's ocular lenses narrowed. Withdrew, yes. Not a retreat, a strategic withdrawal. A low, grinding hum filled the room as Draltal processed this. The humans had not fled in terror. They had chosen to leave, and that meant they were coming back. The first sign of the ambush was not a weapon. It was a whisper, a single fractured transmission, bleeding through the Dralethian comm, net like a ghost. "You came to teach us fear." The voice was human, female, calm, but fear is our oldest friend. Then the stars went dark. Across the fleet, sensors screamed as entire swaths of space vanished from their scopes, not jammed, not obscured, but erased, as if something vast and hungry had swallowed the light itself. Vashdor's neural interface flared with panic. This was not a battle. This was a hunt, and humanity had just proven it was the apex predator section. Faye. Awakening the Titan, the darkness did not lift. Vashdor's neural interface flickered, his augmented vision struggling against the unnatural void. The stars had not merely vanished. They had been replaced, swallowed by something vast and deliberate. His secondary heart thrummed in his chest, a primal rhythm of unease. This was no mere stealth field. This was something older, something hungry. Across the bridge, Draltal's armored form stood motionless, his molten, core optics casting flickering orange light across the command console. His claws flexed against the metal, scoring deep grooves. The humans had not just hidden themselves. They had rewritten the battlefield. A whisper of data slithered into Vashdor's mind. His implants parsed it before his conscious thought could react. Gravimetric anomaly, spherical, radius, Faye kilometers. His breath stilled. That was not a ship. That was a world killer. The shape in the dark, the first silhouette emerged like a blade cutting through smoke. Not a warship, not a drone. Vashdor's neural feed stuttered as the sensors struggled to reconcile the scale. The limb was armored, segmented. Each plate the size of a Dralethian cruiser, etched with scars that spoke of centuries of war. It stretched forward, fingers curling as if testing the fabric of space itself. Then the second hand followed, and between them, something opened its eyes. The light that bled forth was not the sterile glow of plasma or the harsh burn of fusion drives. It was the deep, smoldering crimson of a forge's heart, the same hue as human blood under a dying sun. The Titan awoke. The first lesson, Draltal's voice was a grating rasp. "Scan it." Vashdor's implants screamed in protest as they tried. The readings made no sense. The construct's armor was a composite of neutronium weave and something else, a material that drank in energy like a desert-consumed rain. Its power signature was not a reactor. It was a heartbeat, slow and deliberate, each thrum sending ripples through subspace. And then the voice came again. "You wanted to see our teeth." Commander Maya Fraiser's tone was calm, almost conversational. "Here they are." The Titan moved, not with the clumsy thrust of engines, but with the terrible grace of something that had never accepted the tyranny of physics. One hand closed around a Dralethian destroyer, its segmented fingers tightening with the ease of a predator crushing bone. The ship's shields flared once before collapsing like paper in a furnace. Metal screamed, then silence. The second lesson Captain Thomas Carter watched from the Titan's core, his body interlaced with its systems, his mind woven into its wrath. He could feel every shudder of the dying Dralethian ship, every final pulse of its failing reactors. He did not relish it, but he remembered the burning cities, the orbital strikes raining down on civilian hubs, the Dralethian broadcasts declaring humanity a feral species to be broken or purged. Now they knew the truth. Humans were not feral. They were patient, and they had spent every second of their exile forging a god. The reckoning Vashdor's neural interface overloaded, his mind buckling under the weight of the Titan's gaze. The stories had been wrong. Humans were not creatures of fire and chaos. They were smiths, and they had just unveiled their masterpiece. Draltal's roar of defiance was lost in the void as the Titan's other hand rose, its palm glowing with the concentrated fury of 1,000 suns. The last thing Vashdor saw was the light, not the clean clinical energy of Dralethian weapons, but something older, something that had waited so very long to be unleashed. The darkness answered. There was only fire. The fire did not fade. It lingered. Vashdor's vision swam, his ocular implants struggling to compensate for the afterimage burned into his retinas, a searing white scar across the black canvas of space. The Titan's weapon had not merely fired. It had unmade. The Dralethian flagship, Iron Resolve, was gone. Not shattered, not broken into molten debris. A perfect sphere of nothingness yawned where the vessel had once been, its edges still shimmering with the residual heat of atoms forcibly divorced from existence. The void itself seemed to recoil from the wound space, time rippling as if flinching from a predator's touch. Vashdor's mandibles clicked in involuntary distress. He had seen superweapons before, Dralethian siege, breakers that could glass continents, singularity projectors that crushed fleets into stellar dust. But this was not destruction. This was annihilation, and the humans had done it with one shot. The weight of memory Draltal's voice crackled over the comms, raw with something Vashdor had never heard in his commander before. Not fear, not rage, but recognition. They learned. The words were a whisper, yet they carried the weight of a dying star. Vashdor understood. The Dralethian Dominion had taught humanity the language of war. They had burned their cities, shattered their fleets, left their worlds as graveyards wrapped in radiation. They had thought themselves the masters of violence, the architects of extinction. But humans were not students. They were translators, and they had taken every lesson, every atrocity, every whispered scream from the ashes of their dead, and refined it. The Titan loomed before them, its obsidian hull drinking in the light of distant stars. It did not advance, it did not gloat. It simply waited, its silence more terrible than any war cry. Vashdor's neural feed flickered with incoming data, scans of the human vessel, its systems, its weapons. His mind recoiled at the readings. The Titan was not a ship, it was a promise. One the humans had carved into the bones of the universe. The first move Commander Maya Fraiser watched the Dralethian fleet through the Titan's augmented display, her fingers resting lightly on the command console. The aliens had frozen, their formations tightening like prey animals circling against a hunter they could not comprehend. She had expected satisfaction, vengeance, even. Instead, she felt only the cold precision of a surgeon's scalpel. "Captain Carter," she said, her voice calm. "Open a channel." The Dralethians answered immediately. Their transmission was laced with interference, their once imperious tones now frayed, with something perilously close to desperation. "Human vessel." Draltal's voice grated through the speakers. "You have made your point. Stand down." Maya's lips thinned. Stand down. As if this were a skirmish, a border dispute. As if they had not burned Earth's children. She exhaled slowly, her breath fogging the inside of her helmet for the briefest moment before the recyclers whisked it away. "Negative," she replied. And then she did something the Dralethians had never seen before. She smiled. The second lesson, the Titan's weapons array hummed to life, its energy signature flaring across the electromagnetic spectrum. The Dralethian sensors screamed in protest, their systems overloading as they tried, and failed, to categorize the power building within the human vessel. Vashdor's claws dug into his console, his carapace vibrating with the subharmonic tremor of something vast and terrible awakening. "What are they doing?" he hissed. Draltal did not answer, because he already knew. The humans were not firing, they were calculating. The Titan moved, not with the sluggish momentum of a warship, but with the terrifying grace of something that had rewritten the laws of physics to suit its will. It slipped between the Dralethian formations like a shadow given form, its hull shimmering with an eerie fractal distortion. Vashdor's breath caught. Phase, shifting, a technology the Dominion had deemed impossible. And yet the Titan wielded it as effortlessly as a blade. The first Dralethian escort died without warning. One moment it was there, its guns trained on the human vessel. The next, the Titan's prow passed through it, the alien ship crumpling like foil in a god's fist. No explosion, no debris, just silence. Draltal's roar of fury was lost beneath the screams of his crew as the Titan turned its gaze upon the next ship, and the next, and the next. The final truth Vashdor's mind fractured under the weight of understanding. The humans had not built a warship to defeat the Dralethians. They had built a predator, and now, at last, the galaxy would learn what humanity's enemies had always known. In the dark, in the quiet, in the spaces between stars, there were things with teeth, and they had been waiting so very long to bite. The Dralethian command throne pulsed with molten light, its orange-red glow flickering across Draltal's segmented armor, as if the ship itself sensed his fury. His claws dug into the armrests, the reinforced alloy groaning under the pressure. On the view screen, the human Titan moved with a predator's grace, its phase-shifted prow slipping through another Dralethian cruiser like a blade through water. No resistance, no struggle, just erasure. Vashdor's voice crackled over the comm, stripped of its usual clinical detachment. "High Commander, we must withdraw." Their technology, Draltal silenced him with a snarl. Withdraw, unthinkable. The Dralethian Dominion did not retreat, not from upstarts, not from prey, yet the human vessel defied all logic. It shouldn't exist. It couldn't. Phase shifting was a myth, a theoretical impossibility even the Dominion's brightest minds had dismissed as fantasy. Energy requirements alone should have rendered it unfeasible. And yet, the Titan flickered. One moment, it was kilometers away. The next, its shadow draped across the Dralethian flagship. Like a funeral shroud, alarms shrieked. Crewmen scrambled. The ship's AI, cold and efficient, began calculating evasive maneuvers, only to freeze, its system stuttering as if gripped by unseen hands. Vashdor's talons flew across his console, his bioluminescent veins flaring crimson with panic. "They're hacking us. Not through code, through quantum entanglement. They've woven themselves into our systems." Draltal's spines flared. Impossible. And then the human ship spoke. Not through comms, not through any known transmission. The voice simply was, reverberating through the hull, through the crew's very bones, as if the ship had reached inside their minds and carved the words there. "You took our colonies." The Titan's prow split open, revealing a maw of coiled energy, a weapon the scanners couldn't classify, couldn't even comprehend. "You burned our children." Draltal's blood ran cold. This wasn't a transmission, it was a memory. The humans had weaponized grief. "Now," the voice whispered, "we return the favor." The weapon fired. It didn't strike the hull, it struck time itself. The flagship's shields flared. Useless, the energy beam bypassed them entirely, punching through the ship's history like a needle through flesh. Vashdor screamed as the data hit his screen. The beam wasn't destroying them, it was unmaking them, erasing their past, their victories, their very existence from the fabric of reality. The Dominion's archives flickered, records of conquest dissolving into static. Dralethian worlds, ones that had stood for millennia, blinked out of stellar cartography as if they had never been. Draltal roared, lunging for the weapons console. He would not die like this, not as nothing. But the Titan was already turning away. It didn't need to watch. It knew what came next. And as the last of the Dralethian flagship systems failed, as the crew's screams faded into silence, only one truth remained. The humans hadn't just built a predator. They had built vengeance, and it was hungry. The void between stars was never truly silent. Dralethian doctrine had always taught that space was a forge, relentless, unyielding, a crucible where only the strongest survived. But as the remnants of the Dominion fleet scattered, their once proud warships reduced to smoldering wrecks, drifting in the Titan's wake, even the molten heart of a Dralethian furnace felt cold. Commander Maya Fraiser stood on the observation deck of the Eclipse, her reflection a ghost in the reinforced glass. Behind her, the bridge hummed with subdued activity, officers speaking in hushed tones as they tracked the last of the enemy's retreat. The battle was over, the war was not. Her fingers brushed the scar along her jaw, a relic from the first Dralethian orbital bombardment of Mars. She remembered the screams, the way the sky had burned crimson, the way the ground had turned to glass beneath her boots. Now, the humans had answered, and the galaxy would never forget it. Vashdor's claws trembled as he scoured the sensor logs. The data was fragmented, corrupted by the Titan's temporal weapon. But what remained was enough to freeze the blood in his veins. The humans had not simply defeated them, they had rewritten them. Entire battle groups, ships that had existed mere hours ago, now showed no records of construction. Crew manifests listed names of warriors who had never been born. Systems that had been operational for centuries flickered as if they were glitches in reality itself. And the worst part? The humans had done it without firing a single shot in anger. The Titan's weapon was not destruction. It was correction. A surgical strike against history itself, erasing the Dralethian Dominion's atrocities before they could even be committed. Vashdor's mandibles clicked in distress. This was not war. This was erasure. Captain Thomas Carter exhaled slowly, his breath fogging the inside of his helmet. The Eclipse's Marine detachment had been on standby during the battle. Their boarding pods primed, their rifles charged. But they hadn't been needed. The Titan had done its work. Now, as the fleet regrouped, Carter found himself staring at the wreckage of a Dralethian heavy cruiser. Its segmented armor split open like a gutted beast, molten orange plasma still bleeding from its ruptured core. His HUD flickered, tagging movement. A survivor. Carter signaled his squad, and they moved in silence, their boots magnetized to the derelict's hull. The Dralethian was wounded, its carapace cracked, one arm fused to the deck by molten metal. It hissed as they approached, its crimson eyes burning with defiance. Carter crouched, his rifle still raised. The alien spat something in its guttural tongue. The translator in Carter's helmet stuttered, then rendered the words in cold, sterile text. "You are not conquerors. You are scavengers." Carter didn't answer. He didn't need to. He simply reached down, gripped the Dralethian's remaining arm, and hauled it upright. The alien snarled, expecting execution. Instead, Carter slung its weight over his shoulder and turned toward the extraction point. Behind his visor, his lips curled into something too sharp to be a smile. "No," he murmured, knowing the translator wouldn't catch it. "We're hunters." Draltal's flagship was gone, not destroyed. He stood in the ruins of his own command, his claws digging into the fractured console as the last of his crew staggered through the flickering emergency lights. The bridge was a tomb, its systems dead, its glory reduced to scrap, and the humans, they hadn't even looked at him. The Titan had turned away, as if he were nothing. As if the entire Dralethian Dominion were nothing more than an afterthought. His spines flared in rage. Then slowly, they flattened in realization. The humans had not come for conquest. They had come for justice, and they had taken it, far away. In the depths of the void, the Titan's engines flared once, a pulse of blue-white fire against the infinite dark. Then it vanished, leaving only silence in its wake. And the galaxy, for the first time in millennia, remembered how to fear. The silence after the Titan's departure was not empty. It was alive. Draltal felt it crawling through the ruined veins of his ship, through the scorched metal and the dying embers of his empire's might. The air tasted of ionized plasma and something else. Something old. Something hungry. He had seen the recordings. The Titan's weapons had not simply destroyed his fleet. They had erased it. Ships that had weathered 1,000 battles, hulls forged in the heart of Dralethian forges, had dissolved into nothingness before the humans' fire. No wreckage, no debris, just absence. And now, as the last of his secondary systems flickered back online, the truth settled into his bones like a blade. The humans had not fought like warriors. They had fought like predators. Vashdor's talons trembled as he scrolled through the sensor logs. The data was incomplete, half corrupted by the electromagnetic backlash of the Titan's weaponry. But what remained was enough to make his blood run cold. The humans had not used standard kinetics. They had not relied on brute force. Every shot, every strike, had been calculated. Their weapons had targeted not just his people's ships, but their weaknesses. Shield harmonics, reactor vulnerabilities, even the neural sync frequencies of the Dralethian pilots. It was as if the humans had mapped the Dominion's entire technological lineage in the span of a single battle and then exploited it with surgical precision. And then there was the Titan itself. Vashdor's mandibles clicked in disbelief as he replayed the footage. The human warship had moved unlike anything he had ever seen. No ponderous turns, no sluggish maneuvers. It had flowed through the battlefield, its massive frame twisting with impossible agility, dodging barrages that should have crippled it. It shouldn't have been possible, his breath caught. Unless the humans had engineered their ship to think like a living thing, to hunt like one. Commander Maya Fraiser stood at the edge of the observation deck, her hands clasped behind her back. The void stretched before her, infinite and indifferent. She did not smile, she did not gloat, she simply watched. Behind her, Captain Thomas Carter shifted his weight, his armor still humming with residual energy from the battle. "They'll regroup," he said quietly. Maya didn't turn. "Yes, they'll come back harder," Carter exhaled, "and we'll be ready. This time." Maya did smile, but it wasn't the smile of a victor. It was the smile of something far older. "We always are." Draltal's claws scraped against the console as he forced himself upright. His crew watched him, their spines flickering in uncertainty, their pride as shattered as their ship. He should have felt rage, he should have sworn vengeance, but all he felt was the weight of realization pressing down on him. The humans had not fought to conquer. They had fought to teach, and the lesson was simple. You do not hunt us. We hunt you far away. In the dark between stars, the Titan's engines flared once more. The galaxy had forgotten what it meant to fear. The humans had just reminded it. The Dralethian command cruiser, void-forged, drifted in the silence of deep space. Its once proud hull, now a lattice of scorched metal and ruptured plasma conduits. The orange-red glow of its energy cores pulsed weakly, like the fading heartbeat of a dying beast inside. The air smelled of molten alloy and burnt circuitry, the scent of defeat thick enough to choke on. Draltal stood motionless in the war room, his talons resting on the tactical display. The holographic projection flickered, replaying the battle in jagged fragments. Human ships moving with predatory precision, their maneuvers too fast, too brutal, too efficient. Every engagement had been a lesson in violence. Every counterstrike, a surgical removal of Dralethian advantages. Vashdor approached. His spines flattened in submission, the usual arrogance in his stance, replaced by something unfamiliar dread. They knew, the scientist rasped, his voice raw from the acrid air. They knew how we would attack. Every formation, every weapon deployment. They anticipated it all. Draltal didn't answer. He didn't need to. The evidence was carved into the wreckage outside. Humans had not simply fought back. They had calculated. Aboard the Titan, Commander Maya Fraiser studied the same battle data from the opposite perspective. The Dralethian fleet had been predictable, their tactics rooted in dominance displays and overwhelming firepower. Brutal, yes, but rigid. Like all apex predators, they had assumed their prey would flee or cower. Humans did neither. Maya traced the lines of their counteroffensive on her screen, each stroke of her fingers marking another Dralethian ship disabled, another assault broken. It wasn't just victory, it was demonstration. A message written in kinetics and plasma. You thought you were the hunters. You were wrong. Captain Carter stood beside her, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. He had seen this before, not just in war, but in history. The moment predators realized they had stepped into a trap laid by something far older, far colder than themselves. They want surrender, Carter said quietly. Maya didn't look up. No, they'll see it as weakness if we offer terms. Carter exhaled. Then what's the play? This time, Maya did glance at him, and the look in her eyes was not human, not entirely. It was something deeper, something that had stared back from the dark of ancient forests and ice-bound caves. Arithmetic, she said. Draltal's claws tightened on the console. The humans had not just defeated them, they had measured them. Every Dralethian strength had been catalogued, every weakness exploited. Their ships had been outmaneuvered, their weapons rendered useless, their commanders outthought. It was not a battle, it was a dissection. And now the humans were waiting, not for surrender, not for negotiation, for understanding. Vashdor shuddered, his voice barely audible. They let us live. Draltal's spines flared, then stilled. That was the true horror. The humans had not destroyed them because they didn't need to. They had proven their superiority with such precision, such economy, that annihilation would have been redundant. A predator did not waste energy on a foe already broken, and the Dralethians were broken. Far away, the Titan's engines hummed to life, its massive frame turning toward the next system, the next battlefield. The galaxy had forgotten what it meant to fear. The humans had not. And now, they would ensure no one else did either. The silence on the Dralethian command deck was absolute. No alarms blared, no engines thrummed, no weapons charged. Only the faint, dying pulse of orange, red plasma flickered through the fractured conduits of their flagship, casting jagged shadows across the ruined bridge. The air stank of molten metal and ionized fear. Draltal stood motionless, his armored fingers curled around the edge of the tactical display, now a graveyard of shattered fleet icons. His spines, once rigid with authority, lay flat against his back in submission. His people had waged war for centuries, carved empires from weaker species, and forged their dominance in the fires of conquest. This was not war. This was instruction. Across the ruined command deck, Vashdor's claws trembled as he parsed the final sensor logs. The humans had not simply defeated them. They had dismantled them. Every Dralethian stratagem had been anticipated. Every countermeasure rendered useless before it could be deployed. Their ships had been disabled with surgical precision, engines crippled, weapons depowered, shields bypassed. Not a single human vessel had been lost, and now, as the Titan, that monstrous leviathan of blackened alloy and cold, calculating wrath, drifted at the edge of the system, its weapons silent, its hull unmarked. The truth settled upon them like a blade against the throat. The humans had allowed them to live, not out of mercy, not out of weakness, but because they had already won. Commander Maya Fraiser watched the tactical feed from the Titan's bridge, her expression unreadable. The Dralethian fleet lay scattered across the void, their once proud warships now little more than drifting husks. Some still vented atmosphere in desperate, gasping plumes. Others flickered with the last embers of dying reactors. She had given no order to finish them. She hadn't needed to. Beside her, Captain Thomas Carter exhaled slowly, his fingers resting lightly on the firing console. "They're not even trying to run." Maya didn't answer. She didn't need to. The Dralethians couldn't run. Their engines were dead, their comms silenced, their command structure in ruins. They were predators who had just learned what it meant to be prey. And the lesson had been thorough. She turned away from the display. The Dralethians had come expecting a war of annihilation. They had found something far worse, a war of correction. Humanity had not sought to destroy them, only to remind them the galaxy had forgotten what it meant to fear. The humans had not, and now they would ensure no one else did either. Draltal's mandibles twitched as he stared at the Titan's silhouette on the view screen. The ship was turning, its massive engines flaring to life as it prepared to leave. No boarding parties, no demands, no final, spiteful barrage, just departure. Vashdor's voice was hollow. "They're leaving." Draltal did not answer. What was there to say? The humans had not come for conquest. They had not come for vengeance. They had come to demonstrate, to carve their superiority into the bones of the Dralethian Empire so deeply that no one would ever dare question it again. And they had succeeded. As the Titan vanished into the void, its engines painting the darkness with cold blue fire, Draltal exhaled. The galaxy had changed today, and the Dralethians would not forget. Far away, the Titan's jump drive engaged, hurling it toward the next system, the next battlefield. The humans had paid their debt, and with interest. Section. Aftermath. The silence on the Iron Will's bridge was absolute. Draltal watched the last flicker of the Titan's jump signature fade into the void, his claws flexing unconsciously against the armrests of his command throne. The battle was over. The humans had left. And yet, the weight of what had just transpired settled over the bridge like a suffocating mantle. Vashdor was the first to break the stillness. His voice was low, stripped of its usual arrogance. "They could have destroyed us." Draltal did not need to confirm it. The Titan had torn through their defenses as if they were nothing. Shields shattered, weapons silenced, engines crippled, all without firing a single lethal shot. Every strike had been calculated, precise, mocking in its restraint. The humans had not just defeated them, they had humiliated them. A junior officer, his carapace still streaked with coolant burns from a ruptured conduit, turned toward Draltal. "Hi, Commander. What do we do now?" Draltal exhaled, mandibles clicking in contemplation. The question was not just tactical, it was existential. For centuries, the Dralethian Empire had measured strength in conquest, in the subjugation of lesser species. They had believed their brutalist fleets, their molten, forged weaponry, their unyielding doctrine of dominance made them invincible. And then the humans had arrived, not with overwhelming numbers, not with superior technology, with ingenuity, with adaptability, with a refusal to accept defeat that bordered on insanity. Draltal rose from his throne, the joints of his exoskeleton creaking. "We learn," he said at last. The bridge crew turned to him, their antennae twitching in uncertainty. "We learn," Draltal repeated, his voice hardening, "or we die." Somewhere in the depths of the crippled Iron Will, a damaged power conduit sparked, casting flickering orange light across the darkened command deck. It was a fitting metaphor. The Dralethians had been forged in fire. Now they would either temper themselves in the flames of this defeat or be consumed by them. Far across the galaxy, the Titan's crew celebrated no victory. They had not come for glory. They had come to send a message, and the message had been received.